What's going on, good people? Welcome back to another episode of Trading My Live Account. Today is day number 44. It's August the 10th, 2023. We made some trades today, so let's get into it. First and foremost, let's talk about all of our key levels that we have on the chart today. So you can't see it, it's a little bit further down below, but we have yesterday's closing price at 35,207. Now, above that, we have a zone right here that was drawn off of the pre-market. But what I really want to talk about is this little small zone right here towards the middle of the lower middle section of the chart. Now, this was a zone that was drawn based off of pre-market action that preceded today's CPI announcement coming out. Now, when the CPI news came out, we had a large movement to the upside, which pretty much sparked all of the volatility that we're seeing today. But this zone is very important because this zone is where everything originated from. So that'll play an important role coming into today's session. Now, this red line above was a resistance level that was drawn off of a lower high from the pre-market session and then extended across throughout the market. And then this zone above was drawn based off of consolidation period after the market opened. We'll get into that in a little bit. And this zone at the top, last but not least, was drawn based off of a consolidation period a little bit further after we drew this one down below. So without further ado, let's go ahead, jump right into it. Let's talk about trade number one. So as the uptrend started, we see that the market spiked to the upside at 9:30 when the market opened for the New York session. Now after that, I saw a swing high get created, and then I saw my lower high get, swing high, and then a pivot point to the downside. So I used those 2 points to draw my zone, and then I used the zone as a reference point for all of my entries that followed that. So on trades 1 and 2, I went long here at the bottom of the zone, but what I'm learning about these zones is that it's better to enter after the retest, because I've seen so many scenarios where you have a strong move to the upside followed by a consolidation, and you think you can just go long at the bottom of the zone, but it'll break past the zone a little bit. But as prices come back and reclaim that zone, that's actually where I should go long at. So going forward, that's something I'm going to keep note of, because I've been learning lessons on trades like trades 1 and 2, but I've been learning that lesson a lot of times over these past couple of weeks. So I think I'm really starting to understand how exactly the trade is set up. It's not a setup that you just put your order at and wait for prices to come back and hit it. You wait for prices to come back into that level, and then you want to see if they'll break down below the zone a little bit and then pop right back up into it, because in situations like these, we know that the trend is up. So it's just a matter of getting the right entry, and that's very important. So that's the biggest lessons I took away from 1 and 2. Wait for prices to come back and reclaim that zone, then go long. So then as we move up, we broke out of the zone, created a swing high, and then started to pull back a little bit. Now right here is where I took trade 3. Now on trade 3, I went long here, but I bought it way too high, and buying at the zone would have been better. And that makes so much sense now that I'm looking back on it. I think in the moment, I was just a little bit too caught up in the fear of missing out, because I saw how strong the trend was, and I just figured, well, if we broke out of the zone and we're continuing to move higher, I might as well participate and go long right here. Now, going long, that's a good idea, but I still got to catch those prices from the best levels. And if the zone is right down below, it would just make sense to go long from the zone after you see a good reaction and you see prices bounce off of the zone. So right there, I just got a little bit too impatient, but I realized my mistakes and I definitely learned from it. So then as we continue moving higher, we see prices eventually kind of stall out towards this level up here at 35,640, and then they started to consolidate a little bit. Now on this consolidation, I did not go long as soon as prices came back into the zone, because I learned from trades 1 and 2. So I said, okay, I want to see the reaction at the bottom of the zone. So once I saw prices create this higher low right here, they pushed up, and then on the next candle, this red one, they came right back down to retest that level. So once I saw a successful retest of the higher low and I started to see prices move away, I went long right here at trade number 4, and then I got out as prices came back up into resistance. Now after trade 4, that was pretty much the highest price that we saw for this entire upswing so far today as I'm recording this trade review video. So after that, we pretty much see prices create lower highs, and from that point I could draw a bear trend line based off of a swing high as well as the lower highs, and then just connect those and extend that line throughout the market, and that's how we get this bear trend line right here. Now Looking at this bear trend line, you're probably asking yourself, Ty, why didn't you go short if you saw a bear trend line plus a zone breakout? The reason I didn't go short is because the uptrend was so strong, and I've learned over these past couple of weeks that when you do have a strong trend, no matter how good those pullbacks look, you still got to trade in line with the trend until it's just clear and obvious signs that the trend has definitely changed and switched directions. So you always want to make sure you don't participate in those pullbacks until you see that confirmation. So that's actually what led me to trades 5 and trades 5A. Now, right here, we see that we did establish a double bottom, right? So one of my favorite setups is to look for a double bottom that's followed by a higher low. And then I look to go long based on the support level for that higher low and take prices back up to whatever major level of resistance is located above. So that was pretty much my mindset going into trade 5. Now, if we read the notes, it says I went long here after a double bottom, and I would have profited if I held this one. And that's the thing. So let's zoom in a little bit and really break this down. Now notice we had our double bottom right here, 1 and 2. And then we came back, created our higher low where I went long from. Now, if you notice, I went long at this blue triangle on the red candle as we came back to create that higher low. And then as we pushed up, I should have been taking profits at the top of the green candle, but I closed this trade out early as it started moving against me because in this scenario, I wasn't really quite sure. I know that the overall trend was up, so if we see a double bottom and a higher low, we should be moving to the upside. Maybe not all the way back up to test the highs, but at least to test the bottom of the zone, and that for me is all I need in this moment. So that's what I was looking for, but I was also a little bit hesitant because I saw the bear trend line, and if you look at it, we really just established one consolidation zone below the other. So this was the original zone up top. We broke below that zone and then was never able to get back above it and really established a new zone right below the old zone. So when it comes to price action principles, that's a very bearish signal, especially when the trend was as strong as it was before, and then we start consolidating and breaking out to the downside. That's not what you want to see. So looking back, I should have just held that trade, but because I was hesitant, I didn't do that. And when I look back on it, the biggest lesson I could take away from this is when you're unsure about a trade and you feel like you could argue both sides, because in this situation, I could argue the short side as well as the long side. In situations like that, you just got to really take a step back, reevaluate, and then just sit on the sidelines until you see a lot more clarity come into the market. You start getting signals that are telling you that, okay, it's definitely leaning more towards this side than the other one. So always be patient when you have times of indecision. You don't want to just make trades hoping that something will happen, because you might end up like I did and have to take multiple losses, 2 losses as a matter of fact. So always make sure in times of indecision, just wait it out until you get better confirmation. So what I did learn from trades 5 and 5A though was that whenever you have a double bottom plus a higher low, and that doesn't lead to higher prices, that's telling you something very significant about what the sellers want to do in the market. And it's telling you that the sellers are extremely more dominant than the buyers are at that point in time. And that's actually what led to the downtrend continuing today. So as soon as we broke past this level of support that the double bottom was offering, I immediately switched my bias over to the short side. And I did that because we already had the consolidations to the downside that we discussed. We had our bear trend line that it did get respected, and then we had a failure of a double bottom. So that's all of the reasons why I actually flipped my bias to the short side. And then I went short at trade 6 after seeing a double bottom failure and a strong break of the support level from trade number 3 below. Now, if you were to take trade number 3, take this swing high, extend the level of resistance across, you would pretty much run into the same area where I took trade 6 from. So this candle where I entered, even though it closed down here, while it was open, it actually came back to retest that 75 level one more time. So I was able to catch the short trade right there and just take it back down to the bottom of the zone. Now we see prices continue. The downtrend pushed all the way back down to what used to be a support level from earlier on in the market. So that's pretty significant too, because I was looking at this level from earlier and I wasn't quite sure if it was going to be a major level, but as we can see, prices came back and retested and respected this level for at least almost a good 45 minutes. So that level was definitely significant looking back on it. So after we bounced back from that level, we found support right there, pushed up, created a higher low, and had a little micro uptrend back up to the top of the zone. And I want to talk about real quick, I want to talk about trading zone to zone when you're in situations like this. Whenever you have an uptrend that's coming back up into the bottom of a zone, I've always learned that, and I've learned the hard way actually, that you got to resist taking the long trade right here. Even though you see prices breaking back up into the zone, you could see prices come back, retest the zone. And then on this candle was actually green for a good little minute. So it made all of the buyers think that we were pushing up to retest the top of the zone. But I've learned so many times that that's not the case. It's going to come back up to the bottom of the zone, give all of the buyers a fake out, and then continue to move to the downside. So I think one of the best decisions I made today was not taking this long trade right here, because I think that would have threw off my entire just mental focus, because taking bad trades that you know you're not supposed to, really for me, it just puts me in a bad type of vibe, have a bad attitude, and that could lead to bad decisions down the line. So it's very important to make the right decisions when you have the opportunity to, because going forward in the future, you want to set yourself up for success and you want to have the right attitude and the right mindset. So just a quick little side note right there. And once we had that false break into the zone, we see prices come all the way back down to retest what used to be support, but it's going to become resistance after we break through a little bit later. But before we get to that, we see this long tail candle wick form after we created you call this a lower high. If you look at where we started from, this was a swing high. We pushed down, pulled back, and found our pivot point right there. So I looked at that as a lower high. So I said, okay, we had a lower high. Prices found continuation to the downside and then pulled back one more time. So let me get short right here at the bottom of the zone, and expectations that prices would continue the downtrend and come back to test the zone that we talked about earlier from right before the CPI release. That was my idea on trade 7, but the only thing was I shorted, but I shorted way too low. And what I learned is that I always need to respect the long tail candle wick. And this is something that I've been on the positive side on a couple of times last week. I traded long tail wicks very well, but it's also a wrong way to trade the long tail candle wicks. And this is an example of that on trade 7. So if you see that long tail candle wick and it's coming off of a level of support, that's telling you that it's buying strength in the market right now. So even though the trend might be down, it's telling you that in this exact moment, a pullback is more likely than not, because we're seeing all of the buying start to come in at levels of support. So it would make sense for me as a trader, if I'm looking for that short trade, don't short towards the lows and try and short against the momentum and try and call the top, because the momentum can go longer than you expect it to a lot of times in the market. So what you want to do is just let that momentum run its course. Look for the next level of major resistance. In this scenario, that would be the top of the zone up here. So I should look for that level, and then as prices come back into that level, then I can see how they react. And if I like the reaction and I still believe in a short trade, then I can start looking for those short entry signals. But it's very important to be patient enough, because for me, I trade with tight stops. So I can't just get in at any price. I really got to get in from the best levels and the best prices, or I risk a very high chance of me getting stopped out on my trade. So that's the biggest lesson I took away from trade 7. Respect the long tail candle wick. Don't fight against momentum, and wait for a higher level of resistance before you start thinking short once again. So then we move on to trade 8. Now for trade 8, once I saw prices come back up to the top of the zone and start to move away, that's where I wanted to go short at. But the only thing is, for me, one of my biggest rules is to just not short from the middle of any zone, no matter how appealing it might be, how good I might think it is. Going long or short from the middle of the zone is just highly not recommended, because you open yourself up to too much exposure. Prices could come back to the top of the zone or to the bottom, and you never know which one is going to happen when you're trading from the middle of the zone. So that's why you always want to look to trade those zones from the edges, either from the top of it or from the bottom. But anywhere in between, avoid that. So that's the biggest lesson I took away at trade 8. Once we come back to trade 9, we see prices come back and retest they retested the level of support. Now, the reason I went short right here was because I looked at where we started from up here near the swing high at trade 4, and then I just followed the price action down. So we made lower highs right here, another lower high at 6. Now we had a little bit of a pullback, but we eventually established a new lower high right here where I was talking about earlier at the false break into that zone. That was the actual lower high. And then we come back to trade number 8. We had another lower high. And then at trade number 9, we came back to retest the support level of the higher low. But now that we've broken below that higher low, that level actually becomes resistance. So once I saw prices move away from resistance, that's when I took the short trade in expectation that eventually this support level was going to get broken because the downtrend was just too strong. And the downtrend has been pretty strong over these past couple of days that have been occurring this week. So I said, well, might as well trade in line with the trend and just make the trade that makes the most sense. And to me, trade 9 was that exact trade. So I shorted here and I was able to take prices back down to the bottom of the zone below. Now, after we see prices come back to my target, we see a higher low get formed. So anytime you see a higher low, no matter how strong you think the downtrend might be, you just want to resist trying to go short right there. And you want to let the momentum come into the market. You want to let it play out. And then once that momentum either dies down, you can go short again. Or if that momentum continues and makes a higher low, then you can go long. So that's actually what I was looking to do when it came to trade 10. So I initially expected prices, once they broke back into the zone, to come back, retest the lower portion of the zone, and then move back up to the top. So that's what I was originally looking for. But once we established a higher low right here, like I was telling you before, I'm very hesitant when it comes to trading the zone, especially when I'm in the middle of the zone, right? But the difference between this trade and trade number 8 was that we had multiple tests once we established this higher low. So it would be different if we pushed up, created the higher low, and then just never came back to retest it. That wouldn't be the strongest bull signal. But for us to come back, create a higher low, and then we see 1, 2, 3, 4 wicks, 4 different wicks. So that means that buyers were buying this level for 4 minutes straight, and the sellers, no matter how strong the downtrend was, they just were not able to generate enough momentum to push prices back down to the bottom of the zone at this point. So I said, okay, the most logical direction for prices to go right now would be back up to the top of the zone, and then we'll see what happens from there. So that was pretty much my mindset on trade 10. And if we read the notes, it says, I went long here as prices came back to retest a higher low. One of my favorite setups to use when I see a up move, and then I exited at resistance. So played that trade perfectly. I could have held on for a little bit more, but when prices got up to resistance, they kind of hesitated and they paused a little bit. And I think 2 weeks ago, one of the biggest lessons I learned was to take profits on trades when I have them, even if they haven't reached my profit target, but they are sitting at a level that makes sense. Now, in today's trade on trade 10, getting out at resistance just made sense. Prices really haven't been able to break past that swing high that we made at 0.8. They tried to multiple times, but if they haven't done it before, I'm not going to be the trader that says, oh, well, they can do it now. I'll just take my profits where I can, get out, look for the next best opportunity. So after trade 10, we eventually see that prices did break above resistance, but all they did was come back to create a false breakout and immediately came back into the zone, all the way back down, and sold off to the support level down below at the red line. Now, once we bounced back and created a lower high and came back to retest what used to be the support level of the higher low, but is now acting as resistance, once I saw that and then I saw prices moving away, I was like, okay, the next logical level to look for the short trade would be to look for any type of reaction off of this most recent wick that we had that established a low before this move right here happened. So if we look at it, before all of that happened, this right here at 11, that was the low. So I'm like, okay, prices should come back, retest the previous low, and then move away. So that's exactly what they did, as a matter of fact. And as soon as they did that, I went short and took prices not back down to the top of the zone like I did on trade 9, But because I saw that we already came here to where trade 9 was taking profit from, I was like, the momentum would probably push prices back down to the bottom of the zone, especially since this was a level that we tested once the market had the CPI news come out at 8:30. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about, is that when you have a big news release that comes out and you have a major reaction from that level and you move away from that price point, but then you see prices come back down to it gradually as the day progresses, you should expect for that level to definitely get hit like 9 times out of 10. It's not guaranteed and it's not perfect, so don't expect it to happen all the time. But if it starts to move and it starts to trend in that direction, more than likely it's coming back to that price point. And that was pretty much the idea I had behind trade 11 today. And even though I started out a little rough, I think I was able to close the day and do very well, got back into profit, so I'm proud of that. But it's a lot of things that I definitely need to clean up. You know, on trades 1 and 2, really 1, 2, and 3, I just had a complete lack of patience. And I think that's one of my biggest issues when it comes to a very strong trend. I start thinking that, oh, a strong trend means that it's going to be easy profits. No, 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 no. That's not always the case. Sometimes it might be, but a lot of times, just because a trend looks easy doesn't mean that you're just going to be able to get in wherever you want to and make boatloads of profit. You still got to be meticulous with your entries. You still got to follow your trading plan down to the T and make sure you cross all your T's and dot all your I's, and that you are on top of your game, and that you don't have any lapses in discipline. You don't have any lapses in patience, because they will cost you. So patience and discipline is very important even still. And then we come back to trades 5 and 5A. That just comes back to not feeling as though you are obligated to trade. Sometimes you just got to skip a setup if it doesn't feel right, even though you see that it might work. Like, oh, if I get in right here, it probably would work. It doesn't matter. If you feel non-confident or you don't feel 100% sure about taking that trade, just avoid it. Then on trade 7 and 8, just don't short the lows of a move. I already know that from my previous trade lesson. So, you know, I bounced back on trades 9, 10, and 11, did really well on those, as well as trade number 6 and trade 4. So I was able to finish the day strong, but I don't know, man. It's not the best performance by me, I wouldn't say. You know, I did okay, but it's definitely room for improvement. So I'm gonna make sure I focus on practicing all of these things tonight in my back testing session, and that'll be my main focus. So I want to come back tomorrow and finish the week off strong. We had CPI come out today. I believe that PPI, wait, no, we don't have to speculate. We can just go check it real quick. So tomorrow we have PPI coming out tomorrow. So we had CPI today and then PPI tomorrow. So it's definitely going to be a very volatile session. The same way that we saw volatility in the market today, we should expect to see the same thing tomorrow. So I want to make sure I study hard, come back, fix all of my mistakes, and then finish the week strong on a Friday and go into the weekend with momentum and study hard. But that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you learned a lot about all these lessons that I was able to provide for you. But until then, you guys, wait, actually, before we go, make sure you check out the live video too. That's in my trading my scalping strategy playlist over on the live section of my channel right now. So make sure you check that out. But until then, you guys, take it easy.